Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Welcome.
to. Sorry, a little feedback there. Just working through some technical difficulties. Hold on, please.
Hi, everybody.
Picking up speakers from here, but not from here. So what did I do last time? Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the MDI Reports 2015 Insights and Information webinar. I'm here with Jennifer Fox, our Community Engagement Coordinator, and Kim Schonert-Reichl, our Interim Director here at HELP, and also the Principal Investigator of the MDI project. Jennifer's going to start us off this afternoon, and Kim will join us during any sort of discussion or question and answer period. First of all, I'd like to make sure that everyone can hear me. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties. If you could please type in a question in your question box, that would be really helpful to me, and I could just make sure that everyone out there can hear us. Excellent, we're getting some great feedback. Thank you so much for testing that for me. So a few housekeeping notes before we begin. Hopefully you'll find this webinar platform easy to use if you haven't used it before. Should you have any questions, please use the question box and type the question directly into that box, and we can read them here and make sure that your questions are answered. I will be providing sharing the questions with Jennifer and Kim as they go through the presentation. So if anything is relevant to a particular slide, please push it forward at that time, and I will make sure that it gets onto gets answered during that time. And also, if you're having any sound issues, I suggest you double check your speakers and sound controls. And if you're still having trouble, please call in. There's an information number in your information on your information panel. So I'm going to hand this over to Jennifer. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today. I think we've got about 50 people online, so that's a good showing. I'll just give you a sense of what we're going to talk about today and then get right to the data as fast as we can. So just as an overview, I'll give just a very, very brief introduction of what the MDI is. I think most people who joined us today are very familiar with the tool, so we won't go too much into all of the different measurements and the history of the MDI. But if that's something you're interested in, there's other webinars that have been recorded in the past that you can view on our website, or just contact me directly if you'd like some more information about the MDI itself. So the bulk of the presentation today will focus on the new versions of the MDI reports. We've created a lot of changes and a lot of new features, a lot of new infographics and different ways to display the data. So that will be the bulk of today's presentation. But I would like to save a little bit of time at the end just to highlight a few moving to action pieces. So a lot of my work here at HELP involves going out to communities and hearing about how people are using MDI data to create change. So I'll highlight a few of those as well. Hopefully we'll have enough time. I know the webinar was originally scheduled to be half an hour. I have a feeling we'll probably go over that. So if you need to log off after that half an hour, we will be recording this and will be posted to our website, so don't feel badly if you have to log off, but I'll try to get through this as quickly as I can and save enough time for questions at the end. So just a little bit about HELP. We're located at the University of British Columbia, for those of you who are unaware or maybe joining us for the first time. at the School of Population and Public Health. And the Human Early Learning Partnership is really an interdisciplinary team of researchers who are looking at child development trends across time. And one of our instruments, our main instruments, is the Middle Years Development Instrument, or the MDI. So the MDI is a population-based measure, and it's a self-report survey of grade 4 and grade 7 students. So the kids actually get to answer this entire questionnaire by themselves. We've adapted it from paper to online in the past year, so it's going really well. The transition, we're getting a lot of great feedback that students are really able to go through this survey on the computer with relatively few difficulties. So the MDI measures the following 5 dimensions: social-emotional development, connectedness both to peers and to the adults in children's lives, their school experiences, their school climate, and physical health and well-being. We measure a lot about nutrition and sleep, and a lot about after-school activities, which is really beneficial for people working not just in the schools but out in communities and parks and rec and library. So just a bit about why we decided to do these updated reports. We've been doing the MDI since 2009, and we've done a couple of new versions of the reports over time, and this year we have kind of consolidated all of the feedback that we've received through community engagement, through webinars and phone calls, and really trying to make the reports as useful as possible for the people that are looking at the data. So this year again we have the school district and community reports, so that is the level of the school district data, but also you'll be able to see the data by your individual neighborhoods. And then of course we do have the traditional school reports as well. These reports are not made public. Principals are given these reports, and they often do some activities with their school staff and look directly at the populations of children in their specific schools. And then new to this year, we created a guide. We heard a lot back from communities, and I'll go a little bit more deeply into this during the presentation, about the need to create an understanding kind of report. So we took the index out of the old reports, and we pulled that right out and created this new document that really helps you dig deeper into the scoring of the questions on the MDI and a lot about the research on MDI topics. So as far as community engagement, a lot of the changes that you'll see in these reports that I'll highlight today really came from a lot of people out there in the communities. And I just wanted to give a special thanks, especially to the Mount Pleasant community. We spent a lot of time at their office consulting with quite a few people and really getting into the colors, the infographics that we were going to use, whether people understood what we were doing or maybe we needed to simplify a little bit. So really thank you to all of those people that helped us with those focus groups. And once again, we've heard a lot of feedback through email and phone calls. We've done quite a few webinars, so we've had some feedback there, and as well as our in-person presentations. Both myself and Kimberly Schonert-Reichl have done a lot of presentations, and we're always encouraged by all of the feedback that we get in person as well. So one of the things that I'm including in this presentation is just these kind of speech bubbles that you'll see throughout, and I'm including quotes from people from the communities. So really telling you what we've heard from you and how we've adapted our reports to suit what we've heard. So the first thing is that people really wanted to be able to compare data across the years. So we really thought that minimal changes to the reports would be good. So it's not a huge shift. You'll see a lot of familiar things, just a few tweaks that will help you really interpret the data in a better way. So in the old reports, you got this demographic sheet where it showed the district sample size, so the number of children that actually completed the MDI questionnaire in your school district, and then the participation rate, so that's how many children in the entire district participated. A little bit of a gender breakdown, and then languages spoken at home. So we've kept that element in the new reports, but we've also added some participating districts. So this year you'll be able to see all of the districts that participated during the last year. And we also give you their participation rate and the numbers of children that have participated in each of the districts that have joined us, the MDI this year. You'll see a little bit later why this is important, because we felt like people needed some kind of comparison to see if their data really reflected what was going on in other school districts. So you'll see later about how we compare to an overall average of every student that has participated. So in the old reports, we had this breakdown of the MDI dimensions with their icons listed. We've developed some new icons this year, and we think that they better reflect the dimensions themselves. So we're really lucky this year to have hired a graphic designer, and she has really stepped up and given us a lot of new infographics like this. So you'll see these new icons that are replacing the old ones. In the past, this is how all of the data from the dimensions was given. It was all done on one page, so you were able to see all of the measures listed out. And I think in the past, and maybe Kim, you might want to chime in on this, is that people thought that they would just focus on one area that seemed to be the lowest green bar or the shortest green bar, or maybe they would focus on the bar that showed the lowest well-being, so they were concerned about the red pieces. And what we know about children's development is that we shouldn't expect all of these categories to be exactly the same, and maybe we might want to think about how we would expect connections to adults at home, for example, to always be reporting higher than connections to adults at school or in the neighborhood.
Yeah, so I think, hi everyone, this is Kim Schonert-Reichl. Great to have all of you here and listening, and especially this inauguration of all these new reports. And I think Jennifer brings up some really good points in this idea that, you know, how do you make sense of these data when you have all these numbers across all these different kinds of constructs? So it isn't just on sort of focusing on the one where you see the most red, but it's always about how relative it is to other ones as well. So like adults at school versus adults at home and adults in the neighborhood, and looking at what you would expect. And so actually it'd be really interesting, you know, some of you, as you sort of go and present your data to others, you might even ask as you're presenting, what are some ways to the group you're presenting where you think adolescents might have the most thriving across those ones? So it's always about the relativity across those as well.
Yeah, and so to reflect that, we wanted to break this out a little bit and not to have so much data all on one page. So, oh, and then the other side of the page was also the entire data for the after-school activities in the district. So once again, what we decided was to break it out into the separate 5 dimensions and have different sections for each dimension. So you'll see in the report this little chart that shows you all of the measures that are included in each dimension, and then the report follows in the table of contents. It's very easy to see how all of the measures for social-emotional development come first, followed by physical health and well-being, so on and so forth. So you'll no longer be getting all of the data on one page, but it's really a better, fulsome way to be showing the data. And I'll just give you a couple examples of that. For the social-emotional page, so we have the title at the top, and then we also thought it would be useful to include, why is this dimension important? What does it mean to have, to be reporting thriving in social-emotional development? So we give a little bit of context here. And then we break down every single measure, and with the bar charts that are no longer all in one row, but they are divided up between the thriving, the medium well-being, and the low. So you get this little graph on the side as well. So what's new for this year is that we decided to include this little diamond piece. And what you'll see is that this diamond will show you the average for all of the participating districts for this year. So you're really able to compare against where you are against where the average is for not the entire province, of course, because we don't have full coverage of the MDI across the province every year. But this will give you just a hint of where you're sitting compared to others. And then for the physical health and well-being, it's a very similar kind of looking page. So you'll have a little bit of description of why we think this dimension is important for children's development. And then once again, the measures broken out individually. Feel free to submit any questions if you have any as I go, and I'll answer them as we go. You don't have to hold them till the end. So this is another piece on the old reports. We had some of these tables where we had questions that we asked on the MDI, and they were broken out into the response categories that children could answer. A lot of the feedback we received is that people just kind of glossed over these. They weren't really very interesting to look at. And so this year we've designed some new elements here. So whereas before you had a table of how often do you like to eat food, junk food like pop, candy, and what time do you usually go to bed? This is our new version. So it really just gives the eye a more pleasant way to view this data. So you'll see you're a lot more easy to understand what times children are going to bed. And then the infographics with the soda cans I thought were great. Our graphic designers helped us with those as well. So here, once again, is an old version of how we break down all of the measures on the MDI and which ones fit into which index. This is sometimes an area where people struggle trying to figure out which pieces go into the well-being index and which pieces go into the MDI assets index and which pieces are kind of standalone measures. The feedback we received was this was kind of complicated, so we created a newer version, and we'd be happy to receive feedback from anybody out there on whether this is an easier way to illustrate which elements are going into which index.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in here. This is one thing I know, Jennifer, you probably mentioned this. This is Kim again. We are so interested in obtaining your feedback about these new reports. You know, this again is a sort of first pass at these, and so if any of you are really willing to be interviewed, perhaps even have a phone call set up with Jennifer to walk through and give your feedback, we would love to set that up. So maybe either after that webinar we could send a request to people who've been part of the webinar who would be willing to have a short interview to kind of give us any feedback about the reports, both the things that you feel really work, because of course we always want to hear that, like, you might say, that's fantastic, I'm so happy you listened to us and did this, or things that you're like, well, I'm not quite sure. And you might want to give us feedback right away, or you might want to wait till you present some things and find out what are the challenges. So I just want to reiterate what Jennifer was saying, that we really want your feedback.
Great. So moving on, here's the old version of the well-being index. So it's a simple pie chart with some percentages listed. And our newer version, we thought it would be interesting to show the number of children that have been included in here. So you don't have to be flipping back and forth between the demographics page and the well-being index. So you get the number of children right there in the center. And then once again, we didn't change it too much. We heard that you wanted to be able to compare across time. So I think this gives you an idea of how you could do that pretty easily. Here's another comment we heard from communities, is that is our neighborhood and district doing better or worse than others, and how can we tell? So what we decided with the well-being index is that we would offer these 3 levels of data. So you're able to see how your particular neighborhood is doing on the well-being index, how many children are thriving, how many are in the medium to high, and how many are in the low well-being category. And then you're able to see also across your entire district and how that compares to all districts. Now there's a little asterisk next to the all districts. Once again, that's just all districts that participated only this year. and those districts are listed at the beginning of the report. Here are the old versions of the maps. So we showed the percentage of children thriving, and where you see darker green colors are the higher percentages, and the lower percentages are reflected in the lighter shades of green. And what we heard from communities is that these neighborhood maps are great, but they only show the percentage of thriving. And people are also very interested in comparing the low well-being and the medium to high well-being. So what we did, it's kind of difficult, as you can imagine, to try to include all three of those pieces of the pie, the green, the red, and the yellow, all on one map. So what we did instead was to create a table that would look like this, that would show all of the percentages for each of the neighborhoods reflected in your district. So you're really able to see where you are located as far as other neighborhoods. The other piece is that we included the number of children in each neighborhood. And moving on to the assets index. So I think generally people were pretty happy with this, but our knowledge translation team does a lot of work on looking at the research on what elements could we include in our reports that would allow people to digest the data in a more efficient way. And what we know about knowledge translation is that there's several ways to reflect data. And what we know is that different reflections of data offer different cognitive loads. So your brain is only able to interpret some of these faster or easier than other ways. And what we know about knowledge translation is that this puzzle piece, although it does reflect different shades of coloring, it's actually easier for our brains to understand bar graphs, because right away we see which bar is higher, and that's reflected in the percentage of children that moving away from this puzzle piece, but we are keeping those shades of brown to really reflect the darker shades of brown where the soil is nice and rich and where children are able to grow the best, and then those lighter shades where it's desert kind of sand where it's more difficult for children to thrive. So you see on the left where there is a bit of a difference in the percentages, 72 and 73% for nutrition and sleep versus after school. But those shades look very similar, so you'll be able to see the difference a little bit better using the graphs. And once again, we included this little diamond for the average for all participating school districts. So here's how it's reflected in the maps, the older maps, and then the newer maps. So they look very similar. We've kept things pretty close to the same. And we took out a little bit of the content so that it's easier to just see the percentages listed with the colors. So the other thing that we heard from communities is that it's important to have the ability to see how we're doing compared to other neighborhoods. So once again, just like the well-being index, we'd like to do the same with the assets index. So we also included, in addition to these bar charts for each asset, a neighborhood table. So here's where we make use of all those different shades of brown. And as you can see, we're able to see the differences in each asset. And typically what we see across all neighborhoods and all districts is that that nutrition and sleep asset is the one that's traditionally reported as expressing the lowest numbers of children with that asset. Anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, some of the things to really sort of hone in on here are sort of thinking about the adult relationships. Certainly that's one place that people go to, and as you see here, it's pretty consistent. However, there's these areas like, you know, I'm just looking at the one adult relationships of the 90% Mackenzie, Upper Fraser, and the South Fort George. And I think, you know, people often go to their ones in which they're low. They go right to the dry sand, you know, instead of the rich soil. And I think it's really critical to begin with the strengths. And so I would actually offer one recommendation whenever you're going to talk about your MDI results and present them out for the first time. I would always start with some of the strengths. Here's some things in our community in which we find children are really doing well or flourishing or thriving. And then to spend some time, why? Why do we think our children are doing so well in that? And so, again, the adult relationships is a great way to say, what ways in our community are we working to create these positive adult relationships?
Yeah, and I guess I should have mentioned I've just been cutting and pasting from different reports, so the numbers here aren't necessarily for the same school district slide after slide. This one just happens to be Prince George, but the focus here is really about how we are displaying the data, not in particular all the numbers, because they definitely won't be relevant for everybody that's on the webinar today. So this is how we used to present the weekly after-school activities, or the organized activities that children were engaging in. We kind of combined everything into the any organized activity pie chart. And then the most popular ones were the sports and music and arts. But we actually collect data on a lot more after-school activities than just those categories. So what we decided this year was to kind of pull that apart and give you a lot more data. So here we see at the very top of the page, you will see any organized activity. So any activity that was structured and supervised for an adult. So that's the overall measure. And then we divided those up into education lessons, music and art, youth organizations, and then we took that sports category and we divided it further into individual sports versus team sports.
I'm just thinking about the people who have to get off the phone right now, and I wonder if, just because we originally scheduled for half an hour, if we want to just take a minute to see if there's any kind of burning questions from someone who needs to go right, like in a couple of minutes. I know we're kind of we still have a little bit of ways to go, but I just really cognizant of that. And seeing, is anybody raising their hand?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, everybody's willing to stick it in.
Okay,
that's good.
There we go.
Okay. So once again, we have this little diamond that shows you where the average is for the participating districts. And then the use of after-school time, we really focused in on the homework, the TV, and the computer use. These are kind of trendy topic areas that people were really, really interested in. So this is our last year's report. But we do collect a lot more data on what children are doing after school. So we broke it out again into all of these different topic areas. So we're giving you the percentage of children that are reporting they're doing 2 or more hours of these activity, or 1 to 2 hours, 3 minutes to an hour, or less than 30 minutes, or not at all. So as before, we were only reporting not at all, less than 2 hours, or more than 2 hours. So this is one page that I would really hope that people would give us a lot of feedback, whether you feel like this is too much data, or this is helping you in your planning and your goal setting, or especially those community people who are running after-school programs, if this is helpful at all to know how children are spending their time after school.
All right, and I was just going to add, you know, as you can see here, we didn't want to use kind of a good, bad, worse kind of coloring scheme, and so we thought we would have, you know, just give the neutral, because some of them it depends. Is there a question?
There is.
Great, yay! Thank you. Question, Esther.
We've had a question. Does the MDI ask about faith-based after-school activity?
No. It does not. I will give some historical thing about the after-school time. So originally, the United Way of the Lower Mainland study that sort of led to the development of the MDI was a assessment that took about 3 class periods and asked many things. And over the from the development of the MDI, although we had many things that we wanted to ask, that was one of the questions we had to cut out just to try and make it more streamlined. So although I think it's really important, we weren't able to keep it on the MDI. But I would suggest to people that when they get their MDI results and the kids are saying how they're spending their time, it might be a way to dive deeper and do focus groups with kids or other kinds of surveys as a follow-up to the MDI to learn about those kinds of participation.
Great. Okay, so here is the old version of the neighborhood pullout sheets. So we wanted to give people just kind of a flash, a one-page flash on a little bit of data at the neighborhood level. And the feedback we received was that there was a lot more information available at the school district level, of course, but can we get this level of detail at the neighborhood level? So of course we couldn't include all of the over 100 questions on the grade 7 and 77 questions on the grade 4 questionnaire, but we did our best to include the ones that we thought or we heard from people were most important. So moving from this one-pager over to a 2-pager sheet that looks like this. So you'll have a front and back. You'll be able to print the front and back and just pull it out of the reports for any of those meetings that you're going to where you don't need an entire full report. You're just interested in one particular neighborhood. So I'll just go through really quickly what's included on these 2 sheets. You get the well-being index with all of the measures that go into that. Obviously with your school district average, this is a new piece this year, once again, this little line that you'll see, and then the diamond that I talked about before. Also on the neighborhood pullouts, we decided to focus a bit on the adult relationships, the peer, and the nutrition and sleep, and the after-school activities. So you're kind of getting all of the assets all on one page and all of the bar charts. We included a lot about the after-school activities, keeping in mind that our community partners are very much interested in this data. A little bit of it was on the old reports, but we do this year include your neighborhood places that provide programs for kids. So you'll see you'll have their wishes, your barriers, those places, and how many days they participated in those after-school activities. Then we also new this year included the percentage of children who responded that there was an adult in their neighborhood that really cared about them, that believed they would be a success, and who listens to them when they have something to say. So that's really that connection to adults. It gives you a little bit more data. And we heard from communities about the safe places. They wanted to dig a bit deep into that data about whether children thought there were safe places where they feel comfortable hanging out in their neighborhood. So we included that as well. The other piece of feedback is that people were really looking to us as a research institute here at UBC to dig a little bit into the peer-reviewed research. So people wanted some links that they could use. I think a lot of people are using these in funding proposals or just for their own academic interests. So we did include some published research, some quotes, and you'll see throughout the report there are little quotes like this with a little icon of a book. And whenever you see that icon, you'll know that that comes from a peer-reviewed paper. And the sources for all of those papers are included in the understanding report. So if you really want to look at the entire paper and not just the one quote, you can do that as well. So once again, here's an example of a page in the MDI report, and at the bottom you'll see that little book icon with this one is a quote from a paper that Kimberly Schonert-Reichl used. And then you'll also see the little shovel icon that will remind you to go back to the understanding report if you're looking for more information about the measures that are on this page. And finally, moving into the guide that we created that's brand new this year. We're really excited about it. So we took that whole index of terms out of your reports from last year and we moved it all into this beautifully designed report that you can download separately or just look at online. So the feedback was that the reports were quite long and people wanted us to remove this index of terms. People also had questions about kind of the validity of the instrument and are student self-reports accurate? What if the student is just having a bad day? What is the well-being index? So there are a lot of these questions that have been coming to us, and we decided to answer all of them in the understanding report. So it's a pretty fulsome document we're pretty proud of. So take a look and you'll be able to find all of the questions answered. And I'll just give you a few more examples of the things that are in there. It really describes the tool itself and the history of the MDI, why and when it was created, and how were all of the questions selected. We talk a little bit about how the questionnaires are collected and stored in a secure data center here at UBC, and about privacy and suppression of data. There's a lot in there about how the data team here at HELP analyzes the data and how all of the scores are calculated. There's a few composite indexes that we use that are a little bit complicated scoring rubrics, so you'll get all of that in there as well. And then a little bit about how we created neighborhood boundaries. So here's just a brief outline of what's in there. So we give a definition. So one of the things that we measure on the MDI is self-regulation, and one of those measures is short-term self-regulation. So we give you a definition of that term, and then we give you the examples of the questions that are included on the MDI questionnaire itself. We then offer you a response option scale. So these are the response options that children are given on the MDI. And then we tell you a little bit about how this measure is scored. Here's another example about the well-being index. This is a very popular one that we're asked a lot of questions on because there are so many items that go into this index. It's actually 15 questions that are combined to determine the percentage of children that are thriving versus low to high well-being. So once again, we give you the response options for all of these questions and then how we calculated the scoring for this index. Here are those research papers that I was talking about before. So you have a whole bibliography at the end of the report. It's quite lengthy, and we divided it up into the individual dimensions on the MDI and then further divided it into the measures. So if you're looking for some recent research on happiness, you can go straight to that section, or maybe you're looking for some nutrition and sleep kind of research. It's all in there. Then the final piece was the moving to action piece. So a lot of people asked us, how can we use our data to really start moving to action with children and with other people in our community? So we give you a few suggestions here, and I'll go into those a little bit deeper. This is one of the most popular things that people ask us. So the number one thing we always tell people is to engage in as many conversations as possible around your MDI data and involve as many stakeholders as possible. And here you'll see I bolded and put the cap locks on for the word children. That's one of my passions here at HELP, and a really great piece of what we're doing here at HELP is really going to children, doing focus groups with them on the survey itself, and then asking them, what do you think teachers in your school could do to help improve your levels of happiness or empathy or overall well-being? So we've had a lot of great responses from that work. The second piece, so I guess that's all about involving children. The third piece is actually learning from the success of others, and I'd like to just flip that on its side as well and saying teaching other people about your success. So if you do see, as Kim mentioned, some of those high numbers, try to focus on the things that you're doing well, all of those strengths that you see in your school or your community, and try to share those stories with other people. And then the fourth piece is using our tools for action. So we have developed this online toolkit for everybody. You'll see there's print resources that you can download, including a copy of the actual questionnaire. We also have these wonderful new posters that you can print out and put up around your rec centers or libraries or in your schools. Really highlights the importance of the middle years and why it's a time of risk, but also a time of opportunity for children. We have all of our videos. We record all of our webinars, so those are all available for viewing on our toolkit page. We also offer some PowerPoint slide decks. So if you're looking to do a presentation like this yourselves, we provide all the slides for you, and all you have to do is insert those pieces of data that are relevant to you. There are also some worksheets that are newly developed this year that help people reflect on their MDI results. These have been really popular with principals that are interested in doing kind of a staff meeting looking at the MDI results. They've also been used in professional development days and across communities for setting goals. The piece that we're really looking forward to in the future, and there are a few stories on our toolkits page, but we're really looking to beef this part up this year and hoping that we can get some feedback from everybody on the line today about how you are using the MDI to create change. So there are a few stories there that will give you a little bit of insight into what other districts or other organizations have done with their MDI data. So that's about it, and I'd like to open it up now to see if anybody has any particular questions for either Kim or myself about the new reports or even about the MDI in general. None so far?
None so far.
Questions?
Wait a minute.
Oh. Is there a question emerging?
There is.
Yay.
I'm sorry, I'm just reading it.
Everybody's just waiting. What's that question?
Is there an easy way to compare over the years?
Oh, that's a really good question. That's one thing that I think as we are beginning to accumulate a larger number of districts participating to be able to look at how the MDI Thriving Index has changed over time. We have not really done, like the EDI, we have not really done that just in part because there's some districts that return a couple of years in a row, so do we get rid of them from, you know, do we look at just theirs over the case? I think the only way right now is to compare over the years if you have a district and you would just look at your reports in terms of your indices of well-being kind of thing. Right now we don't have anything, but it's good to know that this is a question, and we'll note that as something that in the future we'll want to be able to present some of those stats. We are really still hoping to get more provincial coverage, so we'll feel that we have a larger number of representation across the province. Anything else? I think you might. Anything? I think that.
I think that's good.
Will this information be translated into other languages?
So we haven't thought about, I mean, well, we of course have thought about the idea of the reports translated into other languages. Right now, we have the permission slips translated into how many languages? Like 13 or 14 languages, but we don't have the capacity to have these translated. One of the you know, and I'll raise this, one of the issues around the MDI is that unlike the EDI, and I'm guessing some of you are familiar with the EDIs, we do not have ministry funding for this project. So we rely on just a small amount of funding from the United Way of the Lower Mainland. We have a small amount of funding from the ministry this year and last, but not a large amount of funding which to do those kinds of things like translate it. I will say this is one thing that I did this past this year, actually, is gave a presentation to parents in Vancouver in which they then had did a Chinese sort of on same time Chinese translation, so I'd speak and then they'd have the Chinese translator there. So that would be the other thing I would recommend to districts, is to find to see if there's things going to be presented how they could translate it, or just take a snapshot of some of the highlights they want to share and then see if they could have their and someone in their district who, I know in larger districts they often have someone who does some translations for parents and work on it that way. But we'd be interested in hearing more suggestions.
So one of the other questions that we just received is, when will the data be available? So we timed this webinar exactly so that we would have a couple weeks after the reports were already finished. So all of the reports are actually online right now, the school district and community reports. So you'll be able to see school district level and neighborhood level right away. So those are all found on our website under the MDI Neighborhood tab. If you're having difficulty finding that, you can give me a call or send me an email and I can walk you through it. As far as the school reports, if people are looking for those reports, those have also been finished and have been sent out to all of the principals, and the superintendents, I guess. Yeah, so once again, those are private reports. So if you're a teacher working in the school and you know that you have, your school has done the MDI, maybe just have a talk with your principal and ask if he has received that report from the superintendent, and that's how you would get the data that way.
We had a question about some of the graphics that were in your presentation. Mm-hmm. The panelists noted that the Vancouver School Board was not listed in the latest series of reports, but the data and graphs were included in your series. Is that from past?
Yes. Yes, those were just some examples of old data.
Yeah. And then one final question at this point. Do the results reflect how Aboriginal and newcomer students are doing?
Does it, the students, so the two things, I think it's two different kinds of questions. So we have not separated out the data for Aboriginal children in this. They are, of course, included in, if they're in a school district. They, of course, their data are included, but that's a separate process to request Aboriginal reports and Aboriginal data. And I think the main contact for them is Kim there, is that correct? Yeah. For the Aboriginal contact, and there's a certain process if you're interested just in the Aboriginal data. The newcomer, as far as the newcomer data go, you know, as I think, I don't know, some point you might have said or just mentioned, I know we don't translate the reports, but we don't translate the MDI into different languages. So if there's newcomer students who do not speak or read any English, they would not be included in the MDI unless at the school there is someone who would sit with them and read each question to them and do the translation for them. So it depends on how you define newcomer too, because if it's in the sort of official Canadian, I think, definition of newcomer is being in Canada 5 years or less, and so certainly if a child could speak or understand English, they would be included in this. But again, we have not separated out that, and we don't really have a question that would get at how new you are to Canada. We might be able to get that data from the personal education number, from if they have it at the school district level.
Okay, great. If there's any more questions, we'll take them now. Otherwise, I just want to remind people that we have recorded this again, and we will be posting it to our website. It'll be up on our blog and probably put on the MDI Toolkit page as well. But if you do have any other questions, please feel free to email me or call me. I'm at my desk all the time, so I'm waiting to hear all of this wonderful feedback that we're going to get from people. And yeah, if anything's not working for you, we'd love to hear that too, because we're constantly in this feedback loop of creating reports, getting, hearing from communities, and changing what we're doing so that it can be most useful to all of you. Nothing else?
Nothing else.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and look forward to more of these webinars. We're trying to get out about a webinar per month, so different topics, not just about MDI, but a lot of different research topics that our professors here are working on. So look forward to more news soon.
Thank you, everyone.